its way to China, and Macau will play host to today's weigh-ins. In the main event, Rich Franklin returns to middleweight for the first time since 2008 as he takes on Kung Lee. The former Strikeforce champ is riding the momentum of his first UFC win. Lee, Franklin, and all of tomorrow's fighters take the stage next. It's the UFC weigh-in on Fuel TV.
There's former UFC middleweight champion Rich Franklin. He's looking to make another run at the 185-pound title with a win on Saturday. Standing in his way, former Strikeforce middleweight champion Kung Lee. Coming off the first win of his UFC career back in July, Lee's looking to spoil Ace's return to middleweight and continue his winning ways. And with that, we welcome you live and on the other side of the world in Los Angeles, California, Karen Bryant alongside Brian Stan and UFC bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz. Now, guys, it is a little after 6 p.m. right now in China, pretty early over here on the West Coast, and I noticed, Brian, you're wearing your jammy pants.
I am. You didn't notice my Mickey Mouse slippers on. I'm glad they're not on camera. But, you know, all because of this landmark event. First time UFC's ever been to China. This is huge. 1.6 billion people are now going to get a taste of the UFC. Very exciting for every one of us, fighters, and just for the sport in general.
Been to Sweden, been to Brazil, been to Japan. Why not go to China? Take that over too. UFC is everywhere. You can't stop them, and they're going to continue to assimilate the entire world. You'll never get rid of them, and I think that's what they're going for.
Well, we shall see. Well, you just saw the guys arrive in the main event of the night. It's Rich Franklin making his return to middleweight against kickboxing specialist Kung Lee. So now carrying a 7-2 record into the division, both of those losses only coming to the champion Anderson Silva. Rich Franklin is clearly very difficult in this weight class. So Brian, what can fans expect from Franklin come fight time?
Well, you know, I think we could expect a classic Rich Franklin fight. He's going to be very diversified. He mixes it up well. He cuts a lot of weird angles, and he has a different kind of southpaw style with his looping right hands because he's actually a right-handed fighter. But he's going to need to close the distance against Kung Lee. He's got to get in tight where he can use his boxing skills, use his clinch game, and not give Lee the distance he needs to throw those kicks. All
right, well, looking to crash the party is Kung Lee. Dominic, what does he have to do to get his second straight UFC victory?
Stylistically, you know, he needs to just do what he's been doing, and that's keep his feet moving, use his footwork to stay on the outside. That way he can land the spinning back fists that he throws, the spinning kicks that he throws. He uses range better than anybody with the front kicks that he throws, and he sets everything up with kicks. He doesn't even use his punches. In order for him to win this, he needs to use his boxing to set up his kicks so he doesn't get taken down.
Well, Lee is riding high after the first win of his UFC career when he defeated Patrick Cote back in July. We are now going to send it to the fourth member of our team, Gareth A. Davis, who is on the ground in Macau. He's got more on Saturday's historic event. Take it away, Gareth.
欢迎中国, or in these parts, welcome to China for the first and historic UFC event in this part of the world. We're in the Cotai Arena on the Cotai Strip in Macau, just off the foot of mainland China. And they are dramatically involved in this event. The UFC want to capture 1.3 billion people who live in mainland China. In the main event, Rich Franklin, the former UFC middleweight champion, takes on Kung Lee, one of the most dangerous strikers in the world. But this is a fully international card. Fighters from 8 countries. There are 8 Asian fighters on the card, and a lot of Chinese interest will center on Tiahuan Zhang, the Wolf, who fights John Tuck, the Chamorro from Guam. There is massive interest in that fight. The breaking news, however, is that the South Korean Hyun Hyu Lim, the welterweight, has not been able to come to the weigh-in. He has a problem. The doctors wouldn't let him take part in the bout. But David Mitchell, his opponent, has been asked to stay on standby and on weight. Back to you in the studio, Karen.
All right, thank you very much, Gareth. Unfortunate news about Lim. Great pronunciation, though. Make sure to keep an eye out for Gareth, Brian, and Dominic during the weigh-ins. They may pop up from time to time with some interesting facts on a few UFC on Fuel TV 6 competitors. It is time now, though, for the Twitter poll question. The UFC has stopped down in China for the first time ever. What country in Asia would you like to see the UFC go to next? To vote, use hashtag Philippines, India, South Korea, or Indonesia. We will have results later on in the show. But coming up next, Franklin and Lee step on the scale, and we'll find out how Franklin looks at 185 for the first time in over 4 years. Plus, the rest of the fighters weigh in from Macau. John Anik will call the festivities. Stay with us right here on Fuel TV.
Just like a
But
stress
how much
ball.
do you walk around at?
About like 58,
Yeah.
158.
What do we need more? Less definition and more
So what's
makeup?
this next segment about Rich?
I don't know. I'm
This
kidding.
next segment's about Rich?
Only
No,
if
this is
the
the weigh-ins,
feed goes
sir.
out. Yeah, the
Yeah,
weigh-ins are coming up.
if we lose the weigh-in or anything, we're going to freestyle and talk
Oh,
about
okay.
Rich.
Got it. And the weigh-in's about to start right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Against former middleweight champion Rich Franklin. Also on tap in the light heavyweight division, Thiago Silva takes on Stanislav Nedkov, and we've also got a pivotal welterweight bout between South Korea's Dong Hyun Kim and Brazilian Paulo Thiago. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Synergy, powered by science, the great tasting sugar-free zero-calorie energy drink, the official energy drink of the UFC. Tap out.
What's up, Macau? A pleasure to be here for the UFC's first show in Greater China. The Octagon girls are here. UFC staple Reed Harris, our matchmaker Sean Shelby. The veteran voice of the Octagon is Bruce Buffer. Our managing director in Asia is Mark Fisher. Mike Mersch holding it down, and the inimitable Burt Watson is here as well. We begin with our Facebook prelims. They begin at 8:40 here in Macau, 7:40 a.m. Eastern. Our first bout in the middleweight division, Ricky Fukuda versus Tom DeBlas. First fighter to the scale is Tom DeBlas. $185 for Tom DeBlas and his opponent, Ricky Fukuda.
Ricky Fukuda making his way to the scale right now, actually changed up his training schedule and moved to AKA, American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California, really looking to diversify his abilities coming in despite being such a long-time veteran in the sport.
$186 for Ricky Fukuda. All right, our next bout in the flyweight division, Yasuhiro Arashitani versus John Hands of Stone Lineker. First fighter to the scale, John Lineker.
John Lineker lives a quiet life in Paranaguá, a fishing village in Brazil, but he spends his downtime breeding chickens and crab hunting, believe it or not. He's named after the famous English soccer player, Gary Lineker.
And his opponent, Yasuhiro Arashitani. $125.5 for Yasuhiro Arashitani. Our next bout in the bantamweight division, Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres versus Matanabu Tezuka. First fighter to the scale making his UFC debut, Matanabu Tezuka. $135.5 for Matanabu Tezuka. And his opponent, Alex Caceres.
Alex Caceres' hero is Bruce Lee. That's why he calls himself Bruce Leroy. He fights with a smile, he writes poetry, he loves acting. But ahead of this fight, Caceres has been training with UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson and at altitude.
$136 for Alex Caceres. All right, now we get to the main card for the UFC on Fuel TV, 9 a.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. for the first fight here in Macau. It is in the bantamweight division. Takeya Mizugaki versus Jeff Hellbound Hoagland. First fighter to the scale, Jeff Hoagland.
Jeff Hoagland says his 13-year-old daughter Michaela changed his life when he was a 21-year-old tearaway on the wrong side of the tracks. She's now a star softball player, and after training and fights, he watches all her matches on recorded DVDs.
For Jeff Hoagland and his opponent Takeya Mizugaki.
I know Mizugaki from the WC days. He's got good submission defense, great takedown defense, and great boxing fundamentals. Look for him to keep the pressure coming forward, to land the big heavy punches, and keep it a sprawl and brawl fight the entire night.
And a hook for Takeya Mizugaki. Our next bout in the lightweight division, Thiago Silva versus John Tuck. First fighter to the scale making his official UFC debut, John Tuck.
John Tuck suffered a horrific toe injury when he was trying to get into the Tough House, but it was also the day his daughter Natalie Rose was born. So instead of going into Tough, he went home, spent 13 weeks with his daughter, saying he learned to be a better fighter and an even greater father.
$156 for John Tuck. And his opponent, let's hear it, Macao, Thiago Silva. $155 for Thiago Silva. All right, our next bout also in the lightweight division. Takanori, the Fireball Kid Gomi versus Matt Danzig. First fighter to the scale, the Ultimate Fighter Season 6 winner, Matt Danzig.
Mac Danzig loves nature and wildlife. He also loves to photograph it. He's already had 3 exhibitions, and he says his greatest adventure outside the octagon so far in his life was photographing brown bears in the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska.
$155 for Matt Danzig. And his opponent, Takanori Gomi. $155 for Takanori Gomi. Our next bout in the welterweight division, Dong Hyun Stun Kim versus Paulo Thiago. First fighter to the scale, Paulo Thiago. For Paulo Thiago. And his opponent making his 10th UFC appearance, Dong Hyun Kim.
Kim is a great southpaw, and he's got a very heavy left hand. He's looking to come forward and get in that clinch and land his great judo throws. He's a black belt in judo, and his submissions are bar none some of the best in the division. Keep a lookout for his vicious throws and his great standout.
$170.5 for Dong Hyun Kim. Now we get to our co-main event in the light heavyweight division. Thiago Silva versus Stanislav Stucky Nedkov. First fighter to the scale, he is the undefeated Stanislav Nedkov. Stanislav Nedkov. And his opponent making his 10th UFC appearance, Thiago Silva.
Thiago Silva making his way on stage. I've actually had the privilege to fight on the same card as this gentleman several times in my career. One of the nicest yet most aggressive fighters in the UFC roster. Always a treat to watch him fight. Cannot wait for this particular fight tomorrow night.
Thiago Silva. That is your co-main event tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen. Thiago Silva and Stanislav Nedkov. All right, now we take a closer look at the two men involved in tomorrow night's 5-round main event.
I'm from Vietnam, and Macau's a few hundred miles away. It's like my backyard. And being the main event, it's a dream come true. Martial arts definitely helped me and mold me as a person. My training's on, my diet's on, my rest is on, everything's taken care of. I fight to win, but you never know in this sport. You can't look past Rich Franklin. I have to be tunnel vision for Rich Franklin. He's gonna bring it, and I plan to bring it right back.
Rich Ace
When I wake up in the morning, Kong is the first person on my mind. When I go to the gym, He's the person I'm thinking about the whole time I'm preparing my game plan. I've sacrificed the last 8 to 9 weeks of my life preparing for one individual. Victory is important. I want to be the best.
Rich trying to get it out. He's down. Franklin has done it.
The key to me winning this fight is execution. It's making sure that I execute in the octagon the way that we drilled to execute.
Wow. On the button.
We look at pattern recognition for Kung, and we surround myself with the kind of training partners that we need to mimic his style. I went to Singapore getting ready for this fight. I started working with the Sandao and Wushu fighters that mimicked Kung's style real well. Kung does a good job of throwing these kicks. He's tricky, and he's got some explosive techniques, and I'm a very exciting stand-up guy. Both of us have no qualms about walking to the middle of the octagon and banging it out.
It's all over.
This will be an exciting fight.
It is our middleweight main event, first fighter to the scale.
The legend, Kung Lee, making his way on stage for the weigh-ins. He actually left his longtime home of American Kickboxing Academy to get a more exclusive and personalized training camp for this particular fight that he says is actually the biggest fight of his career.
.186 for Kung Lee. And his opponent making his 20th UFC appearance, Rich Ace Franklin.
Rich Franklin is one of the most experienced southpaws in the UFC. Look for him to keep his defense tight, keep the forward pressure, and make it a boxing match with Lee in order to cut out all his unorthodox striking. He's got great takedowns and great wrestling, and he needs to grind out Lee through this fight.
185 for the former middleweight champion. And that is your main event in Macau. Thank you all very much for coming out. If you are watching the UFC weigh-ins on Fuel TV, plenty more coverage to come with Karen Bryant, Brian Stan, Dominic Cruz, and Garrett Davis. We send it back to Los Angeles, California right now. KB, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, John. Now, guys, nothing too dramatic here at the weigh-ins, but Brian, were there any standout moments for you?
Well, you know, the only thing that really stood out to me, I wanted to see Tia Tran Jung come out. You know, this is a young man who's got a lot of pressure on him coming to this fight. He's the only native Chinese fighter on the card, fighting in front of his hometown crowd. And, you know, he had a lackluster performance his first time out in the UFC, so he needs a good performance here in order to start and get a career going in the UFC. And it's tough to do that when it's the first time the UFC's ever been to your home country, and you're the only guy in the card from that country.
Yep, Dominic,
I mean,
anything?
my favorite part personally of the whole weigh-ins was seeing Reed Harris up there. Reed Harris getting some love back in the WC days. You gotta love those guys. And then you got John Anik up there looking very Dave Scholler-esque.
Oh man,
so,
a little
you know,
inside
waving
stuff
the
here,
papers
but
around. You know, I'm just saying.
good stuff, good stuff. Well, coming up after the break, Franklin finds himself back at 185. How did Brian and Dominic think Franklin looked on the scale, and what does he need to do to come up aces in China? We break it down next.